Where do I go? What will I be? It's who I am. What will they see? Maybe I pray, yeah. At the end of my days, yeah. What will they say? What will they say?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I've seen, from working overseas to working here in the States, for most men that we've dealt with, the biggest obstacle for them is understanding who they are. So they don't know their identity is not wrapped up in that they're a beloved son or loved or valued. It's wrapped up in I've got to prove something to somebody. And so they're already at a disadvantage. They're almost at a defense place, right? And so anything that they do, it's driven by this proving something instead of I'm going for a purpose.
That's it.
And that's the biggest downfall I see is because then, if you're pursuing a purpose, then it doesn't matter how many times you fall. You just keep getting up because you have this goal in mind. You have this end result that you're looking towards. And it's usually bigger than what you could ever do. So therefore, you just are always striving towards that place. But when you don't have clarity in that of who you are, you're always still struggling trying to prove that you're the man.
That's
it.
it.
You got it.
Yep.
And for most people that I see that are shipwrecked, that they get off course is because they got in this tangent of trying to prove something over here and lost sight of the big picture. And it's the devil's in the details, but there also is the reality is when I've got that big picture in mind, then I may swerve all over the place to get there, but I still have that one objective. I've still got the GPS still rerouting you. Even if you get off track, you may go see sightseeing, go see a specific area, but then you're constantly getting back to, but this is my purpose. This is why I'm here. And so, for me individually, that was the big part for me was when I realized that human trafficking wasn't just something on the movies. It was something that was out there, that was present, that I couldn't ignore. Like I knew it was there, but I think the thing for me individually, I was in Peru doing a leadership conference. I was speaking to pastors, business leaders. We were talking about how they could impact their nation. So these were predominant leaders in the country, and there was about 600 people there. And I closed the door to my nice 5-star hotel, and there was a sign there that said, with a baby and a slash through it, and it said, "No sex with infants." And I was like, at that time, I think it was in 2007, at that time, it was just, this can't be a thing. For sure, that's not an appetite that a human being has for sex with an infant. And I thought, my God, something horribly must be wrong in the culture for them to have. I mean, if it's a sign, it's because they've had incidents, right? I mean, you just don't put a sign up just for no reason.
Yeah, I don't see those at the local Hilton.
Yeah,
that's insane.
And so it was like, I was grieved. At that time, I had a 1.5-year-old, and my wife was pregnant with my second daughter. And I thought, my God, that can't be a thing. I was grieved, but when we see something ugly or disturbing, we see it, we kind of wonder how that could happen, and then we kind of go about our life. And it was about 6 weeks later, I was in Tokyo doing another leadership conference, and I'm in a totally different chain, so it's not like it's something that they just did across the board. I closed the door, and that same sign was there in Tokyo, and I'm like, and I remember sitting on the bed, and the guy that I was with, me and him had done ministry together in the Philippines for several years at that point, and just the heaviness and brokenness that I felt, I mean, it was overwhelming, and I remember just sitting there and just absolutely sobbing like a baby, and it was uncontrollable. It was not something I worked up in myself. It wasn't just I saw something that I believe the Lord was doing something deep in my heart and breaking something inside of me, because there have been many times where I've seen an individual on the side of the street, and I thought, basically they're a crack whore, right? That was the terminology that I knew growing up. That's what I saw. These people were on crack. They were on drugs. They were prostituting. They made some horrible choices in life. And that was the kind of the perspective that I had. And at this moment, then now we're dealing with infants. They didn't make any choice. This is something that's going on. How is it going on? Why is it going on? All these questions were just racing through my head. But at that moment, I knew this was This was like the David and Goliath moment. This is a giant in our generation that at that point I didn't know of many people that were dealing with it. And in the Philippines, we had seen, if I saw a white guy in the Philippines and he wasn't with his wife, there was a high probability he was there for some kind of sex vacation. And how do I know that? Because they would see me, because I'd often be by myself, because I'd be traveling all over the Philippines with other missionaries. And so they would all of a sudden have this boldness and confidence because they would think you're there for the same thing, right? So you're sitting on a plane, flying from one island to the next, and they'll say, oh, yeah, I had a great time last night. I met these girls, met these young girls, or met these young boys. And they would share all their stories. And so anytime I saw an American in the Philippines without his family, my heart would just drop, because I was like, man, they're here for no good. I mean, every once in a while you'd find somebody that was there for business or whatever, but for the most part, you knew there was some very nefarious activity going on. And to the point that I almost felt like when I sat down on a plane or sat down traveling or anywhere or saw somebody in a restaurant, I would be up front and say, hey, I'm here as a missionary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Just
so that
narrative.
Stigma was not there, because it was so prevalent in the Philippines. And but when I began to realize that these street kids, these individuals that we were seeing every day, that many of them were the target of traffickers. Many of them were being exploited, not just there in the Philippines, but they were literally being brought out of the Philippines and sent all over the world and being trafficked. It was like, okay, we have to do something about it. How do we deal with this? And it was the one area that as a father was very difficult, because in my mind it was like, I don't want to get too connected, especially to kids.
Why do you say that?
Well, because then my heart's in it, and and the level of grief that I experience realizing what they're in is going to skyrocket, right? So it's like I would keep them at an arm distance. I would love them. I would come do activities, outreach with them. We'd play basketball and do stuff, as outreaches. But it was, I would keep enough distance so my heart wouldn't really
be in it.
Yeah, and I think that was the thing that broke that day in Tokyo when I was sitting there staring at that. It was like I could no longer just keep it at a distance. And that's what we often do in life, is we're attracted to beauty. We're attracted to that which is good, which is holy, which is wholesome. And we try to, nobody can remember that dirty motel they drive past going to work that nobody goes to, right?
Yeah.
You just drive past it and kind of ignore it. But at some point there's this realization that, man, there are people out here that are broken, that are undone, that are hurting, that nobody sees, even though they see them every day. And how can we, as godly men who wanted to leave a legacy, how are we going to impact those that, for me it was, I don't know that I can. Like, not that I physically can.
Right.
Like, can I emotionally have the capacity to deal with the stuff that I know is going on behind the scenes? And that day when I broke, it was a matter of, it doesn't matter anymore. If what I get involved in brings me to a place of greater brokenness, then the Lord can take that and use it to bring healing to people. And so I think in any place of divine purpose that we're called into, there has to be this place of brokenness that we encounter as men, because there's this inevitable pride. I got this. I can do this. And it was in those moments that there was this powerful revelation that I can't do this, yet I have to do this. So how am I going to do this? And it was only by the grace of God. I need you to help me. And it's amazing when you humble yourself before the Lord to say, I can't do this, that He will come alongside you and bring other people with you. He'll give you grace. He'll give you understanding. But He doesn't remove the difficulty.
Yeah, right.
Because it's in walking through the difficulty that you get wisdom, that you understand things, that you understand where people are coming from, that you see the world in a different light, that there's something about the struggle, that if we remove the struggle, we don't really get the victory. we don't have the measure of joy that we're called to walk in,
Mm-hmm.
if we don't learn to embrace suffering to some degree. Like there's got to be this place, and even as fathers, for my own kids, like if I do everything for them, and they're not working through stuff,
Yeah.
and I don't challenge them, man, they get soft, they get weak. I was with my son the other day. I've got 5 kids, and my oldest son, he's 12, and we were at the gym playing ball, and I played ball in high school and college, and he's like, Dad, I want to play ball. I'm like, no, you don't. He's like, yeah, I do. And he's like, no, you don't. And he's like, yes, I do. I was like, no, you don't. Because if you really wanted to go to that level, then you would get up in the morning early and do push-ups. You would be willing to, when I said, let's go sprint up down the court, not say, oh, I'm tired.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not there. Oh, I am. No, you're not. You're not there, because if you're there, you're willing to commit more fully than what you're willing to commit. And the hardship, any type of hardship comes, you just collapse.
Yeah, right.
Like we would go out and shoot threes and do drills and stuff. Well, I'm sucking it up today. I'm not hitting nothing. And you could see his shoulder slump, and he'd just get down on himself. I'm like, no. Those is when you keep shooting to get better. And in life, I think, especially in this particular topic with human trafficking, it's not about saving somebody every day, even though we get calls every day. I mean, we're the largest organization here in North Carolina for human trafficking victims. And we've dealt with more clients than all the other ones combined this last year. And we've only been an organization for 6.5 years on the crime freedom side. And but it's not about, you're not going to save everyone. And I think that's probably the hardest part of the dynamic, because we know, okay, this individual is being trafficked. We know this is the situation, and you can't force them to get out. A lot of times they just are so much in survival mode. They're like, I can't do it, or they've got other things that we're unaware of. I think about with the young lady that you saw at our banquet.
Mm-hmm.
What we didn't know that she didn't divulge initially was the traffickers knew where her kids were at.
Mm.
They had pictures of her kids at school with her parents, even though they didn't live with her. They lived with her parents, and they told her, if you ever run, we're going to get your kids. We're going to kill your family. So there was other mitigating factors that we were completely unaware of. But if we would have encountered that situation, we're like, well, we tried and just gave up. And then that happened 3 or 4 times. Well, we tried to help survivors and nobody wants any help, and just collapsed whenever there was difficulty. Well, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Yeah, right.
And that's true in anything in life, right? Yeah. We all have these moments when it feels like everything is crashing around us, and it's in those moments that we cry out to God for strength. But it's in those moments where we get up and we just keep enduring and keep pressing and keep pushing. And for most people, that's the very moment when breakthrough takes place, but they never get there. Mm-hmm. And so they just go from defeat to defeat to defeat. Yeah, right. And then before long, it becomes part of your identity.
That's it.
You get depressed. You just feel like you're no good. You can do nothing. And you see this with marriages, right? They struggle in the first marriage. They didn't have the tools. They didn't have the resources. They didn't understand the dynamic of their own heart. Yep. And so they struggled in communicating. They struggled in connecting. They struggled in loving, for whatever reason. There's all host of reasons why. But then they carry that, and they don't learn their lessons. They don't work it out till death do us part. They end the marriage. They go to the next one. They go to the next one. They go to the next one. It just becomes this endless cycle. And before long, the narrative for the woman becomes, well, all men are evil. And for the man, it's like all women just take advantage of you.
Yeah, right.
And they never can see the good. They never enter into it. Instead of hope, they are in despair. And I think that's the biggest obstacle that we see in dealing with human trafficking survivors is there's no hope. They've been crushed by their circumstances and by their life and by the people that have abused them. Absolutely crushed.
Well, the thing you make me think, gosh, there's so many things you make me think about there too, is going back, because I want to hear kind of how this transition, because when you see the sign in the hotel that says no sex with infants, I think immediately like you see no smoking signs.
Yeah.
And that just means you can't smoke here. That just means you can't have sex with infants here. Just not here, but maybe elsewhere you can, is where that sign sort of implies to me. And then also when you sign up for something like this too, it's not like you say, I really am wanting to paint the house. Well, you can paint the house and you're going to see it to completion. When you sign up for this, I'd imagine you have to know in your heart of hearts, when you die, this problem still is going to exist.
That's right.
And so there's always going to be a suffering and a pain and a non-completion. You can't say, because I was thinking about this earlier, is like, what's your goal? Well, your goal can't be to extinguish. I mean, it is, I guess it isn't, but to extinguish sex trafficking in North Carolina. It just won't, because you just can't, not in your lifetime. And so that is pain. That sucks. That's suffering. And that kind of reminds me of what you're talking about. When you signed up for this, you know in your heart of hearts, you're not going to defeat this.
That's right.
Ultimately, you know, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and you can create awareness all day long, but sin exists in the world. There's going to be the dynamic of people selling other people. I mean, we've had slavery since the beginning of time, and today human trafficking is modern day slavery. It is what it is, and we've got more people enslaved today than if we took all of slavery in history and combined it.
I've heard that before.
And so, you know, you think about when you begin to think about that. You know, I lay at bed at night and think about, you know, I heard stories about what happened in the Holocaust. I heard stories, you know, of people and how bad it was, you know, when slavery was here in America and stuff like that. And you think, oh, if I was there during that time, I would have been a voice. Yeah. If I was there during that time, I would have done something about it. Yeah. If I was in Germany, I would have raised a voice against Hitler. And yet here we are, it multiplied beyond anything you could imagine. Way more than what it was there, it is now. Yeah. But nobody's talking about it. And then when it is brought up, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty bad. But I don't think people really grasp the severity of what's taking place and the depravity of man that we're seeing take place. That, I mean, infants, young kids, I mean, in our wildest dreams, you know, you wouldn't think this is what's taking place in a society, a modern society like this, right? You know, we think about, oh yeah, there were child sacrifices back then. Yep. Well, yeah, there are now. It's called abortion. You know, it's like there are literally child prostitution taking place now. It's human trafficking. It's taking place.
Do you think it's even stronger now too because of the technology?
Oh, absolutely.
And the ability just to
100%. Yeah, the reality that you can be in a jungle somewhere and have a Wi-Fi connection better than you are right here in Eastern North Carolina. I mean, I'm serious. You can go in the Philippines and go out in the jungle where they've never seen a white person ever in their life, and they can get online and have faster internet connection than we are right here. It's like, that's crazy. Yeah. And so that's transpired in the last 10 to 15 years. And so sexual exploitation online through child pornography, through pornographic acts. I mean, you know, I talked to a family, you know, there in the Philippines. This was years ago, and one of my individuals that I worked with, it was a missionary, you know, he was talking to them about the fact that, hey, you know, why would you do this to your own child? Like they were molesting their own child on video. And they were like, well, we make $500 to do that one time, and $500 is what we made it a whole year.
Oh my God!
And so it was like that was for them, this is our ticket out, and so the kid can just, you know, I had a bunch of kids, so it didn't matter. Like the disconnect between, you know, as a mother to nurture and a father to protect, it just completely skewed just because of whatever their situation was. And I'm seeing that not just overseas, but right here. You know, familiar trafficking has increased. You know, we had a stat about 6 or 7 years ago that said it was around 32 to 35% where familiar trafficking, where family members were trafficking other family members.
Okay, hold it right there, because I remember you saying that at that dinner or something to that effect. What does that look like?
So that looks like a father or mother selling their children for commercial sex acts. And that can be online, and that can be in real life, in person.
What's the average age?
Usually the average age of them being sexually exploited on a commercial sex act is between the age of 11 and 14. But we've seen them, I mean, obviously it's infants because I shared that with you, but we've seen them here in the States. We've seen them 6, 7 years old. I mean, we had that huge case in Fayetteville a couple years ago. You remember that case where the mom sold the daughter, and she was like 5 or 6, and to the drug dealer, and he raped her and then ended up killing her. I mean, that was a huge case right here in North Carolina. I can't remember the young girl's name, but I mean, that was in national news. And that was just one incident, you know, that you hear about.
It's like if you see one cockroach, you know there's a ton more.
That's right. That's right. And you see a bunch of baby ones, you
Yeah.
you better be spraying all the time.
Oh my gosh. So 35% ish are from family.
Yeah, and that was about 6 or 7 years ago.
Mm.
The new stats that came out last year, they were averaging about 46% of all human trafficking cases here in North Carolina were familiar trafficking, which was astounding. We're talking about now close to 50% of all trafficking cases are being trafficked by the very people that should be nurturing, protecting, caring, the ones they should be trusting, and they are violating them at the deepest level. Because a young kid being violated sexually, it doesn't just affect them in their body.
Right. Physically, yeah.
I mean, it affects them mentally. It affects how they view themselves, how they view the world around them. It psychologically, it does so much damage, and you see this aggressive agenda here in America to sexualize our children younger and younger and younger. I mean, this is something demonic that's taking place when you're talking about 7-year-olds having, being a trans, the gender is being fluid. This is demonic, and it's for the purpose because there is appetite out there to sexualize our children. We call it pedophilia, but I mean, there's this aggressive nature because sin never just takes you to the one place, never just to fornicate. It's never, pornography doesn't end with just looking at a boob or something there. It advances and it keeps going further and further, and there's something more grotesque or more, something more innocent to violate that it propels you to. And so there's this work of darkness, because ultimately the enemy wants to kill, steal, and destroy, right? And so how do you kill, steal, and destroy? And those are 3 different types of ideas. I can understand stealing something from you, taking something from you, but wouldn't it end with killing you? Like, why the destroy? It's not enough just to kill your spirit. It's not just enough to kill your dreams. It's not enough just to kill your hope. He wants to utterly destroy your ability to be who God's called you to be. Utterly destroy everything in your path that could create a legacy, could have family, could have future generations. He wants to absolutely obliterate your ability to reveal the image of God. And so there's this wicked agenda that we're seeing played out in broad daylight in everyday media. I mean, we're seeing these reports of what they're teaching our kids in schools, what they're promoting in media. I mean, even like me and my wife were watching. We have Disney Plus, and we were just trying to look to see if there was something in there. And finally, I just canceled it. I'm like, oh my God, they're injecting LGBTQ, whatever, plus, whatever it is, into every single movie, video to try to normalize this idea of sexual fluidity, and they're lowering the bar to lower and lower ages. And it's absolutely that, to normalize that, and pornography are fueling the flames of human trafficking.
You make me think of so much there too, because what do they call it where there's a class of people that there's rumors, or I don't know if it's rumors or whatever, they're trying to protect the class of people that are attracted to minors. What do they call that? There's a term for it. It's oh gosh.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the term either.
They're almost, it seems like there's a slight momentum to give more favor to people who are they're just attracted to minors. That's all. They're just attracted to minors. It's just like if a guy's attracted to another guy, or a girl to a girl, there's attracted to minors. I can't think, I've seen this. And
they can't help it.
Yeah,
and
that's it.
And that's the language that you're hearing is, well, yeah, we can help stuff. Like, we can stop. I remember there was this old pastor, when I was young, he would always say, you can't help if a bird lands in your hair, but you can certainly help if he builds a nest there. And he was talking about thoughts. We can have these thoughts, and sometimes the thoughts don't generate from you. Sometimes the thoughts come because something implied or something you saw, and that thought arises because of what that was indicating. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean that's who you are. I mean, can you imagine if we now as a society say that any thought that I have now dictates who I am? Well, shoot, I had a thought of slapping my kid the other day. Does that mean I'm just going to be a child abuser every time?
Right.
I was frustrated. There was something that happened. I didn't do it, but I mean, it was still something that I thought, I was like, oh my goodness. There have been many moments when me and my wife have had disagreements about stuff, and I'm sitting there thinking, this is, and then she says something disrespectful, and I'm thinking, man, I ain't never had no guy to treat me like that. I would reach out and slap him. You have these thoughts, but you don't act on these thoughts.
Right.
Those are things that come up as a result of emotions, of other stimuli, of other suggested ideas. I mean, and then on top of that, I mean, you could actually have a demonic spirit that's putting pressure. There was things that Jesus encountered that they were saying, if you're this, do this, right? Those weren't his thoughts.
Yeah.
And so in what world have we all of a sudden that our thoughts now, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he, yes, but those are what you continue to think on. There's something about saying, oh, no, that's not good, and stopping it. Like, that's been lost in our society. Whatever you feel, whatever you think, truth is relative, whatever, it doesn't matter. Oh, yeah, it's acceptable. Which is always funny to me because everything is acceptable now except the gospel.
I would probably say that's right. Nothing's offensive except the gospel.
That's
I
it.
would say in a lot of circles.
Yeah. You could do anything, but don't bring up Jesus.
Yeah.
Because, oh, no, that's not acceptable. Here, the most amazing example in history, and history's recorded it more than any other person in history, right? There's been more written about him than any person in the world. And there's validity in the historical context of Jesus, that he died, that he rose again. I mean, we have Josephus, we have all these other people that verified the facts of these things. And what is his message? It's a message of hope, it's a message of forgiveness, it's a message of love. It's also a message of divine judgment. But it wasn't divine judgment against you and I. It was divine judgment against sin, against the devil, and a loving Father giving his own Son so that we could be redeemed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I get that there's offense in the gospel because it points out that there's something wrong in me.
Yeah.
But it points out everything that's right in God. It points out the hope that we have, that we can be transformed, that we can be different.
Right.
And I think that's ultimately the message that we are emphasizing and declaring and exposing these survivors to. It's not just pushing Jesus down their throat, but in everything that we're doing, it's the message of hope that life can be different, that this is not normal. This is not the way life should be. No human being should be enslaved. No human being should be abused the way you have. And for many of them, that's the first time they've ever heard that. Because the trafficker has told them over and over again, you deserve this. There's nothing else that you can do. No one cares about you. No one loves you. This is it. This is your life. And if you've been in trafficking 2-3 years and that's been told to you every day, and all the circumstances seem to validate that truth, it's like, well, maybe it's true. And so when they walk into this safe house, for them, they walk in and they go, why is this place so nice? Oh, it's because somebody loved you. See, I'm combating that lie right out the gate. Well, why'd y'all buy all this clothes for us? Oh, because somebody loved you. Somebody gave that because they believed that your life could be different. Well, why are y'all providing all this? How much is this going to cost me? What do you want
what's
from
the
me?
catch?
What do you want from me? Right?
Yeah.
Because everybody always wants. I remember one lady, she came in and we'd rescued her in the southern part of the state. And we've got an MOU with Judge King, which has the only human trafficking court here in the state of North Carolina.
What's a MOU?
Memorandum of Understanding. So it's kind of like a partnership.
Okay.
It's a contract that's drawn out that says we're the provider and these are the rules and the way that we operate together. And it basically just acknowledges that we acknowledge one another, that we're going to utilize each other's services, we're going to help each other out, that we're going to serve for a greater purpose. Yeah. So, we had this call that came in, so we went and picked up this young lady. She'd been living in the trash can, and
Like a dumpster.
Like she was freezing to death outside.
And this is in North Carolina.
This is in North Carolina, and she had not ate for several days. And I remember Beverly went and with one of our case managers and picked her up, and they stopped to get her some food. She said, "Hey, what do you want to eat?" And the lady was like, "Oh, I want this." And before she finished saying that, she says, "But what do I have to do?"
She was already ready to barter.
Yeah, like, do I need to do something to you?
Yeah.
Where are you taking me? Like, it was instantaneous. and it's always on their mind. I'll do whatever I got to do to survive, but what is it that I got to do? You know, and for them, when they walk in these doors, you know, it's, you know, our staff and volunteers and really the community, because we have such great community involvement, from doctors to therapists to lawyers that work with us to help get these cases dealt with. They're overwhelmed. Why would this take place? Why would you do this? Because it doesn't fit inside their narrative. Like, their brain is constantly, they're experiencing love, but they're constantly rejecting it. Like, we have incidences where they'll just blow up just because they're trying to prove that you really don't love me. It's kind of like a kid, you know, they're testing the waters. They're like, this really can't be true. And ultimately what we're pointing them to is, well, we love you because we were broken.
Mm-hmm.
We were undone. We needed transformed, and somebody loved us. Someone prayed for us. And ultimately, Jesus came in and transformed our lives. And, you know, we don't have to preach a message for them to hear that. They see it. They feel it. They experience it. And the questions come rolling out, and then we can begin to share our own personal testimonies with them. And they're like, oh. And for most of them, you know, many of them have come out of all kinds of stuff. I mean, we've had Muslims, we've had, you know, people that were in the occult, like literally witches and occult type stuff. We've had people come out of Hinduism, Buddhist. I mean, you name it, we've probably seen it. And all of them, at the end of the day, even if they're not in a place to really fully surrender to the Lord, there's this acknowledgement. This is good.
Pointing to something greater.
Yeah, this is good. Even though I don't know I can fully wrap my mind around it yet. It's something good. I remember one lady, we were doing jail outreach, and she had been trafficked up and down the East Coast here. And just brutal stuff had happened to this young girl. And a lot of the traffickers, they're smart. They involve them in other criminal activities. So if you ever report me, you're going to jail too. So they'll make them run their drugs. They'll make them steal for them. They make them do all kinds of other criminal activity as well. So that they're involved.
Kind of in on it.
Yes. And so that way they say, hey, if you report me, you're going to jail too. And so there's such an entanglement there of control, manipulation. And they'll sit there, and this lady she'd been in jail probably, I can't remember how many times she had been in jail, 16 or 17 times, had never, ever told her story of how she was being trafficked. Never once. She didn't even identify as a victim because when she was young and she ran away from home because she had a really, really rough home life.
Uh-huh.
And she started hanging out with this guy, and he was like, hey, you can't stay here unless you do this. She had done that for so long, she just thought that was
that's what everyone probably did.
That's what everybody did. Whoa. And so I remember when we were sitting in that interview and talking with her, you know, Beverly was talking to her about, you know, this is not normal, you know, for this. And she started listing some things that she'd already described. She said, that absolutely is human trafficking. And the girl was like, no, that's not human trafficking. And I'm just sitting there going, my brain is trying to wrap around, because this is one of the first clients that we had. My brain is sitting there trying to wrap around, how can they not see it? But they don't. If you're in that world, you don't. All you see is what's around you, and it's like, you know, if all you knew, if all you knew was the beach, right? All you knew was sand and salt water. You'd never been to the mountains. You'd never seen a freshwater lake. That's all you knew. Then you would relate everything to the beach, the seagulls, this, and then if I took you and dropped you, you know, in the jungle of Peru, and you would not have no context for that.
That is such a great point. It reminds me of M. Night Shyamalan, whatever his movie is, The Village.
Yes, exactly.
Where they were in that area, and it was like they thought you're watching the movie and you thought they were in the 1700s, and then they got out of the forest and there was a highway right there.
Yeah. The moment you saw the road, your brain just went, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah. Oh my, that makes total sense though, because it's just been started so early too, and your brain's not fully developed.
That's exactly right. And that's the thing that I think that most people don't realize is, here in America, we're the number one human trafficking country in the world.
Even over like what you just said with Peru, the Philippines, and all that.
100%. We are the number one trafficking country in the world.
And the most developed too, though.
And the most developed, yeah. And so, and if you take why do you think there's this aggressive push to sexualize our children? There is. Why is it to normalize all these type of activities, pedophilia? Why to normalize that? Like, who thinks, oh yeah, that's cool?
Mm-hmm.
Why would there be such an aggressive push? You would think anybody that's pushing that, they're like exposing themselves to the masses. But we've been so lulled to sleep here in America. There have been so many fights about everything that people are just kind of like fought out.
Yeah.
And it's like, I just want peace.
Yeah.
I just want quiet.
Do what you're going to do. Just don't push it on me kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm just going to go to my house. I'm just trying to survive myself. I just can't. I don't have no fight left in me. And you know, I think that was the phenomenon of Trump, right? That, you know, why did all these people like this guy so much? And because he expressed the thing that was making him angry, and it resonated deep in a lot of people's hearts. And like, oh, there's somebody that's fighting something. I'm too tired to fight. Maybe he'll fight, right? Like, he's not just going to, he didn't seem like the guy that would be a pushover that would just simply say, okay, whatever, we'll just do whatever just to make everybody happy. You know, I think that's what resonated so deeply because so many people felt so many injustices taking place. And I think it's true across the board, across the spectrum, that people are looking for someone to stand up and to fight, but nobody's willing to do it themselves. And I think that's where we are at Cry Freedom. We had gone through all these conversations at the state level, all these conversations with all these coalitions to stop human trafficking and da-da-da-da. And everybody was just simply talking about it. Nobody was doing anything about it. They would create awareness. They would teach a human trafficking class to some students or to some first responders, but who was actually going with the SBI and the FBI? Who was going, you know, to the hotels and into the jails and identifying individuals? Who was on the streets, you know, looking for people that were doing this type of stuff and identifying them and then actually, you know, getting them out? Who was doing that? Nobody was. And I remember me and Beverly were sitting in this one meeting, and I was just so frustrated. And I took the notebook. They had handed us these notebooks. It was actually a poverty study that they had done, and they were talking about all the reasons this, and this, but there was some elements there of talking about human trafficking in that. And man, I just got so frustrated, and I just threw my book down. I was like, look, guys, y'all can keep meeting. I can't meet anymore. I can't talk about it anymore. There are people literally dying out there, and we've got to do something about it. And y'all are going to talk it to death, and it's going to die in you, and nothing's ever going to accomplish. I said, we've got to do something about it. And we were like, we don't even know what we're going to do, right? But we're going to do something about it. And so we began to formulate plans of, okay, how do we do this? And so we did the jail outreach, we did the hotel outreach, but then we had nowhere to send them. And so I remember, you know, I'd pulled away and just looked for about 6 weeks developing a plan to how to build a safe house, how to do capital funding for that, a capital campaign to raise funding. And I'll never forget, I walked in the office. I had just finished out some drawings. I'd found some land. We even moved towards getting a survey of this land. And it was going to be a 5-year project before we could ever get somebody in the house, right? To develop this, everything. And Beverly had come in. She had just had a phone call from a pastor friend that told us that this place was available, that a nonprofit was, they were folding, and they had to give their all their profits and proceeds and assets to another nonprofit. And so I said, okay, that sounds cool. Let's call and do that. So we went down that journey, and really through a miraculous course of events, you know, we were awarded this place. And here I was 6 weeks earlier thinking it was going to be 5 years, and here we were 2 months out, and we got a place. And we were able to start putting survivors in immediately. And like every step of the way, the Lord has just done the miraculous, because we gave this holy yes. It may have been with our knees shaking, maybe without any clue of how we're going to get it done, but we acknowledged that this was a purpose that we were called to. And we don't know what to do. We need wisdom. We need direction. We need help. And every step of the way, He's brought the right people along. He's brought the right resources along. We went from an idea to, our budget's like $3.2 million. We've got 52 staff members. We've had about 1,800 clients total last year at Cry Freedom. It was, you don't get to where we are just because you have an idea. Somebody has to sacrifice, somebody has to suffer, someone has to take risk. There's faith involved, and I can tell you it's been hard, right? It's been difficult along the way. I mean, there's been some very difficult battles getting to where we are, and there's still difficult battles. You know, we had a meeting just the other day with our staff, and the conversation was centered around how do we help our staff not encounter this constant secondary trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear these stories every day. I mean, it weighs on you.
Yeah,
heavily.
you're going to carry that weight eventually.
Yeah, so that young girl I was mentioning that had been in the jail like 17 times. She had just no hope. She had no place of, but she sat there for 2 or 3 weeks. Part of it was because we brought donuts in and Krispy Kreme.
Yeah.
You know, that's a good
I'll sit there for
indicator
a
in
Krispy
jail.
Kreme,
Yeah.
dude. And she was in jail at the time?
She was in jail,
Okay.
yeah. And she absolutely had been trafficked, but she just started telling some of her story, but she just didn't identify herself as that. And I remember one day we were in jail, and we were talking about different things, and in that particular message, I was just encouraging them. And we do English class, we do parenting classes, we do life skill classes, we do all kinds of host of different things in the jail, right? But then we also, at the very end, we say, hey, if you want to go back to your cell, that's cool, but I'm just going to share something spiritual with you that from my own personal life, give them an opportunity. If they want to step out, they can, but they want to sit, and nobody ever steps out. They're like, okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah, right.
I want to hear, because ultimately they want to know why you're really there. And so I was just sharing them a story about a personal battle that I had. And I look over, and this girl has been hard. I mean, she hasn't shown any emotions. She's never smiled. Up. Yeah, all these walls up. I look over, and this girl is just, weeping. Like now it gets to ugly crying, and now other people are crying. Like something's breaking, and they're starting to open up their hearts, and they start sharing. And all these ladies start sharing their story, and there's this powerful moment in the jail where like. They may have been trying to kill each other, in the day room the week before, but now all of a sudden they're hugging, they're praying for one another, they're consoling one another, like something miraculous is taking place. And I know it's the Lord, but I'm not sure exactly what all He's doing. Mm-hmm. And this young girl, she wrote a poem, and we give this poem out in every single bag that we have at our shops. It's in that whenever we do like the banquets.
Yeah.
That video that you saw at the beginning of the banquet, that was her poem.
Okay.
That was being read at the very beginning of that video. It's on our website. You can go to our website, cryfreedommissions.com, and you can go right up there and you can see that video. And that poem, I used to cry for freedom. And she goes through the story, and it was just an eloquent poem that she wrote, but it flowed out of that place of brokenness and now freedom. And what was so amazing about that story was, for me and for Beverly and for our staff, that was one of the first big breakthroughs with survivors that we were dealing with. And it was the narrative that we had heard. Why even try? They're too broken. Yeah. Why even try? This is too hard. It's just going to be a money pit. Safe houses are just a money pit. You never get out of it. You're always having to throw funds into it. And most of the time, these people aren't going to be transformed. You can't restore them. It's impossible. That narrative was just being broken right in front of our eyes as we were seeing hope come alive inside of broken people. And not only did she get transformed, but she was restored back to her daughter she'd never seen in 8 years. She ended up having sobriety for 2 years. She started working with us as a peer support specialist. Her story was a story of just redemption. She would go back into the jails and share her story, and girls would just be like undone. And and her story was a remarkable one because it was one I could relate to, because this same young lady I had went to school with in 3rd and 4th grade.
That's crazy right there.
And I didn't know it.
You knew her as an innocent child.
But I didn't know it was the same girl.
Oh, really?
She remembered me. And after a period of time, she said, hey, we went to school together. And I was like, oh. And, that's just another layer of, wow.
Yeah. How close it is to you.
Yes. And I think that's the biggest thing for me is when I came from overseas doing a work in the Philippines, I know we helped start a safe house in the Philippines in 2008. It's called Hope for All Children. And when I came back to really focus on here, it was in 2016, and the Lord just spoke to me. He said, focus back here in North Carolina. And I was like, man, I'm doing this amazing work. Yeah. And we were all over the world doing stuff and just really helping that organization flourish and grow. And so the Lord just said, quit traveling, just focus right here. And I was like, for what?
Yeah.
You know, because here I was doing all this overseas and had no clue it was right here in our neighborhood. And I remember I was in prayer, and two older ladies that I really trust, that are intercessor warriors, that, you know, the ladies pray all the time, right?
Yeah, right.
So if they hear from God, you take notice. And
They're close to the Lord.
Yeah, and so they called me. Two of them called me in a 5-minute span, and they spoke to me and said, hey, I think you need to go down to Wayne Pregnancy Center there in Goldsboro and speak with Beverly Weeks. And I was like, who? Why? What? You know, I was like, that's not inside my radar. And so I went down there, and immediately there was just this confirmation from the Lord. I hadn't even talked to nobody yet. I just walked in the building. This is where you're supposed to be. And I had no idea for what. I thought I had left the human trafficking world behind.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was a new purpose or plan that God had, that I didn't know what I was grabbing for anything. I thought, well, maybe it's to help young fathers, you know, coming in here, you know, to be a voice, you know, a father's voice to these young men who'd never had a father, you know, and I went through the list, and I'll never forget, I wasn't there 6 weeks, and this girl came in, and it was somebody that they had already been dealing with for a period of time, and she had been trafficked by her mother at 7 years old for her drug use. And so this girl now was she was in her early 20s, and had already had, like, man, at that time I think it was like 6 or 7 pregnancies. And so I'm like, what in the world is going on here? And they're like, oh yeah, this is what's going on. And then I found out, oh, this is happening more often. Like, we were having like 2 or 3 people coming through the center to get pregnancy tests because it was free.
Hold on a second. So, sorry to interrupt you, but let's say she comes in, she's pregnant at 11 years old, possible. She goes to the pregnancy center, whether just for a test. Doesn't somehow the authorities then get involved at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. There's mandatory reporting for us when they're a minor at a certain age, right? So at a certain age, there's mandatory reporting. And then part of our counselors' due diligence is we try to identify who the father is, trying to find out what the situation is. And this girl was already in her 20s.
Right, by the time you guys,
by the time we got a hold of her. But that was the first indicator of something's going on. And then Beverly had gone down to the hotel where this girl was staying at and seen other individuals, and it's like, oh my God, this is happening. And so we started investigating, and I was noticing 20 to 30 people coming through our town every 2 to 3 months. It was like, oh my God, this is happening. It's happening here. What do we do about this?
What do you mean 20 to 30 people?
Like, there would be different girls at these hotels that hadn't been there before.
Whoa.
And they were moving them up and down the East Coast. And we're right here directly between Miami and New York.
So you're saying they would move, and that's probably I don't want to say the best way to do it, but that's probably how they would do it, right? Move them up and down 95, and if the girls change their locations all the time, they're already slipping through the cracks.
Yeah, nobody knows them, nobody sees them. They're just there for a little while, and it gives new clientele for whoever's right. It's
whoever's
just,
local,
you're just
living
rotating
there.
it around. Yeah, I mean, when we do stings, this was an eye opener for me. When we started doing stings with the SBI, I remember the first thing we did. We're in this room. We got all these computers out there, and they're soliciting people through all these different apps. And what was shocking to me was I said, well, what's our radius? And they were like, 15 miles. 15 miles.
15 miles?
15 miles. And they were soliciting like 200 people in a 15-mile radius.
Are you kidding me?
And I was like,
just through apps and just message boards and all that?
And we were, that first night, I remember we brought in like 15 or 16 people that actually showed up, to the hotel.
To have sex?
Yeah. 15
people?
Yeah.
Within 15 miles?
But there was over 200 that we were soliciting. Like, we were talking to, trying to get to come in. And it was like at that moment that I realized, oh my God, this is bigger than what I even dreamed possible. And I mean, even when we did stings in rural areas, it was nothing for 150 people in a 20-mile radius.
Fishing in a barrel.
Yeah, and you would have at the minimum 12 people show up.
And they've made it clear. I'm assuming they've obviously made it clear they're probably maybe underage. I mean, when they come to that hotel room, they pretty much got them, right? In terms of maybe they're underage, maybe they're not even underage, but it's prostitution, like.
Yeah. So when we do the stings, there's 2 different types of stings that we do. So one sting is where we're posing as the girl, trying to get the Johns to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And we're absolutely trying to get them arrested,
Yeah.
right? So that's one type. Then the other sting is where we are posing as the John, if you will, and we're trying to get all these other people to come in and we're not arresting these girls unless there's a warrant out for their arrest or they come in with paraphernalia. I mean, the police have to arrest them for that. But our goal is not to arrest them. Our goal is to get them to safety and identify who's been, because a lot of times, we think about, oh, well, they're just like, you got all these OnlyFans and all this stuff that
Tinder
was
and all
like,
that stuff.
you think, oh, well, this is just like that. No, a lot of times there's somebody behind the scenes that's monetizing off of this, that are pushing it, it's usually the person that's driving them. And then what's even crazier is, we think about the pimp is the guy with the gold hat and the suit
cane.
And like 40% of all the traffickers are women.
For real?
Yeah. And so it's like, what in the world? Like, even my own ideas of what I thought I was getting into were constantly getting messed up by what I was experiencing. Like, I'm walking into a world where these other women are trafficking these other women. And a lot of it's because they were trafficked themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So traffic people.
Maybe they're a little older.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they're trying to get the heat off of them. So they bring in other people. And then
It's like a pyramid scheme, kind of.
Yeah, in many ways.
And then so when they come in, when you're posing as the John and the girls come in, but there's probably a lot of times they're like, no thanks, I'm totally good. I don't want to be like saved out of this. Or what percentage would that be?
I would say, 9 out of 10, because you got to think, you're getting exposed. You're walking in, you're thinking it's this. Right. You're probably required to get so much money to bring back to the whoever brought you in. And they're usually out there in the lobby somewhere waiting for you. And so you're thinking about, I got to do this. And so a lot of times, I mean, they've already taken a hit of something. They're drunk or they're high already, just so that they can do whatever they got to do, get the money and get out. And so they already are in that mode of, this is what I got to do. And then all of a sudden, bam, the doors open up and all these policemen are around you. And it's like, holy crap, they're in adrenaline, like their adrenaline's kicked in. They're flight or flight. They're just really, they don't know what to do. Yeah. They're tripping. And
right.
Once they get to us, we're there and they bring them into a room and we sit down and say, hey, look, we're not here. They've already dumped their phone to try to identify who all they've already done a bunch of other stuff. But we sit down with them and say, hey, we recognize this is very heavy. We recognize you probably didn't walk in here thinking that this was going to happen. We're not here to arrest you. We want to get you to a safe place. And we describe to them what we can do, where we can get them. Is that something you want to do? And 9 times out of 10, they're like, I gotta get out of here. Or I gotta do this. They're just trying to get.
It's just too much.
They're just so overwhelmed. But we'll give them our number, we'll give them our card, and a lot of times it'll be a month later, we'll get a call on the hotline. Hey, I'm ready. I need to get out. And and you do have that 10% that are ready that night. And I can't go back. Like, there's no way I can go back. Thank God somebody saw me. But for most of them, it's become a lifestyle. It's become so normal that they know how to operate in that. Anything, they're already so gripped with fear that anything abnormal that's outside of their box of how they know how to survive, they can't comprehend it. They're like struggling to even visualize, what does that look like? Like that.
That makes sense.
And then, of course, like we talked about earlier, their narrative is nobody loves me, nobody cares for me, and so I'm just gonna, because many of the girls. This is what was tripping me out, is we would find one girl in a sting, and then we'd do a sting somewhere else, and there would be another trafficker that had her. They would get passed from trafficker to trafficker. Like, they would maybe break away from somebody, and they end up getting trafficked by somebody else. I mean, we had one girl, she ran from one of our safe houses, and literally we had the SBI involved because it was a high profile case, and she flipped out, and so she ran out, got it. She hitched a ride with a truck driver. In less than 48 hours, we found her in Raleigh being trafficked. And this was like 3 hours away.
For real?
Trafficked by somebody else. Nobody she had had contact with, but she reconnected with a girl she had been with prior. And that girl got this trafficker involved, and they picked her up. And boom, she was already out on the streets being trafficked again within 48 hours. It was incredible. But it just helped me know how all these networks are connected. Like, how all these people know where all these,
Right.
it was just crazy because they know. Like you go in the drug world, they know where the trap house is. They know where you go to get the drugs. They know who to call. Once you get in that life, they just know everybody. And so for us, like, how does an organization like ours get into that seedy underbelly of our society?
Yeah.
And by going to the hotels, doing the jails, actually helping people, word would begin to spread. Oh, these people are legit. They can help you. And so a lot of times we would get calls in the middle of the night, maybe not from the girl that we saw at the sting, but there was somebody that was really broken and was ready to get out, and she wasn't, but that one was. She said, I know somebody you can call. And so we get tons of calls like that in the middle. It's always in the middle of the night too, right?
Yeah, right.
They're like, oh, I'm ready to get out. And you're like, where are you? Can you get to a safe place? And then we start coordinating with law enforcement to make sure that we've got surveillance and got things in place. Because, I mean, our goal is certainly to rescue that young girl, but man, we want to see justice served
right.
as well.
Right. How, man, sorry, you just give me, this topic is just so fascinating just because it's like, it's a whole new world that I just didn't even realize existed until that one night y'all had that dinner. But what would the average the average day look like for a girl who's being trafficked in North Carolina?
I think it varies so much because you have so many different types of trafficking take place. So you have the familiar trafficking, so this young kid could be going to school, and it's taking place in the evening or at night. It could be the illegal immigrant that's here, that they're... I remember this one young girl, she came into our pregnancy center. She was 10 years old, and she was pregnant. She had a positive pregnancy test. And I remember the staff called and said, hey, we got this situation. It's a mandatory report. We're trying to figure out who the father is. There's no real clarity. And that's true. That's common. That's not uncommon for that to take place. But in her particular case, it wasn't because she was hiding it from somebody. She didn't know because so many men had come into her room. And what we found out was, and the parents didn't speak any English, and so we had one of our translators there, and they began to talk to them. And what had happened was this trafficker came along and said, basically, if you don't let me take your daughter and use her for whatever purposes, we're going to report you, and you all are going to go to jail, and you'll never see your family again. And they were blackmailed. The whole family was. They didn't know. They were ignorant, and they didn't know what else to do. And so this young girl, every evening, trafficker would, and everybody... and the migrant workers, from the people that were in the farm area, everybody would come in and have sex with this young girl. And it was like, oh my God, this can't be real. And I think the part that's so disturbing to me is you hear the stories from these young ladies and your mind immediately goes, well, who are the 14 men you had to have sex with a day before you could eat?
14 men in a day.
Yeah, that one young girl, she had to have sex with 14 people a day before she could eat. And it was like, who are these people?
Yeah.
And then you do these things and you find out, man, these are lawyers. These are doctors. These are principals. These are teachers. These are pastors. These are, it runs the gamut. There's
right. It's not
just one idea of who it is, the seedy person that's in criminal activity. It's across the board. I mean, it's pervasive in our culture, and it's like, man, we have a bigger problem than what we could ever imagine because the demand for it is so high. And again, pornography is fueling it. Pornography is rewiring the brains of men.
That's right.
To view women and objectify women and to think, oh, they're just a means to pleasure and not someone to value and to protect and to love. And it's just all about that release.
Yep.
And about whatever pleasure you can bring me in that moment. And it's almost like this. We live in a society full of so much stress and anxiety and pressures that's the release valve that people are going to. But it never just stops there. It just keeps going. And we've got all these people that are, men across the country. You read these studies that they're doing on men, like depression has increased over the last 20 years by like 100%. Like it's not just a few. It was like these astronomical numbers of how much it's increased, and how are they dealing with that? And these are the ways that the enemy is subtly stealing their identity as a man, as a protector, as someone who can raise a family and to protect the community, a warrior, a fighter,
right?
Someone who's a protector. he's eroding that away through just simple release of watching a pornographic film, and then it escalates to this. And before long, he steals that identity from them. And now they're no longer the protector, they're the violator.
Right.
They're no longer the one who fights for injustice, they're the ones who are doing injustice.
One decision at a time.
Yeah, and then it begins to kill everything that could be morally right in their heart, and that line gets crossed over and over and over and over again until now, it's no big deal. That's why that's why I brought up the message. That's why that people are talking about pedophilia is, it's no big deal. Why is that message coming out? It's because that's been killed so much that now I can say something that is obviously evil is good. That I know for a fact that is wicked.
Right.
If you could call anything evil, killing children and sexually abusing children, if anything is wicked in the world, that's evil, right?
Right.
But now we're almost having messages literally go out daily in social media and everything of people promoting that. It's like, and now we're doing it as before, psychologically we had these things that were like, it was a mental illness if you thought you were not the sex that you were born with, right?
Right.
Oh, now it's not. Now it's something to be celebrated.
Gender dysphoria is what it used to be called,
Yeah, and so these were things we actually treated people for, and they were like, man, these people need to be on medications. They need to be helped. They're not seeing reality as it really is. This is a huge issue. To now, if you call it that, you got an issue and you've got a problem. Like they're now vilifying the ones.
Tables have turned.
Yeah, and that's why I don't see human trafficking slowing down. It's just increased more and more and more because our society is so bathed in this cesspool of what they think, this confusion of what's good and what's evil. There's no moral compass anymore, because ultimately, if you remove God, who sets that? Well, you do. Whatever is relative to you. Right. So you take God out of the equation, you take the Bible away from it. There is no rules. It's just whatever you think. And if you leave that to man, our heart is deceitfully wicked, right? If you just leave it to us. I mean, think about it. My boys, I have to get on them. I have to instruct them to what it looks like to be a man. What does it look like to protect your brother? What does it look like to protect your sister? What does it look like to honor your mother? Like, if I don't instruct them and continue to stay on them, they don't do that intrinsically.
That's right. They'll just
drift. I have to
drift.
train them to do that. And sometimes that training is difficult on them. It's hard on them. They're suffering in the process of that because it's not naturally just ingrained in you that that's the way it is. You have to have those perimeters. I mean, discipline is so very important for anybody, but specifically for that young man. If that discipline is not in place, so you move the father figures that have the physical ability to throw you against the wall if need be, and he gets big and the mom is there and he gets bigger than the mom, but he doesn't have that physical threat that could actually be a possibility. Well, he ain't scared of nothing. And that's why we got young kids walking into Family Dollar with a gun and boom, boom, shooting somebody in the heart and killing them instantly over a couple dollars of cash. There's been nothing set in motion in their life to say that this is a boundary.
Right.
This is a restriction. And there's somebody on the other side of that, if you cross it, that will put you back behind that boundary. And we don't have fathers that are doing that no more.
There's a situation at a local school where there's a sixth grader asking for nudes from a girl. Sixth grade, asking them, and obviously a lot of them have cell phones too, but asking girls to send nudes over. And I think he threw a wide net and threw it to a lot of different girls. Well, it just takes one.
Yeah.
And so I think my first thought was, well, someone's got to cold cock this kid, because clearly he doesn't realize there's a boundary. And while it's just sending nudes, obviously that'll progress as he gets out of sixth grade and gets into high school and college, and that darkness will continue. If there's I'm assuming there's no father figure or somebody to say, whoa, man, you can't do that. And the other part I think about too is how many times do we hear about with pornography? The big thing with pornography, well, hey, at least I'm not out cheating with my wife, or I'm not hurting anybody.
That's right. I'm
not hurting anybody. And it seems to me that the more I just listen to you, pornography is probably one of the early roots of this thing.
It is. 100%.
And you think about Cinemax back in our day, that is nothing now. Skinemax is nothing now compared to what we're seeing. And the thing that scares me the most too about this is this doesn't seem so. 10-year-old girl getting having sex 14 times a day for a meal. And you said earlier, average girl, would you say they're raped 6,000 times?
Yeah, so the average trafficking victim has been raped over 6,000 times.
And it's just going to it'll just get worse. That's not the bar for the darkness. The darkness will continue to get darker and darker and darker, it seems to me.
That's
I
right.
mean, it just, like I said, it just blows my mind and blows my mind.
Well, and, you mentioned the young boy, but there's a culture now of they have such access to things that we as kids never had access to. Like, we didn't have access to go see anybody or do anything.
Right.
There's no moral compass. The homes, there's a lot of times there's no father figure there. And if there is, they're oblivious to what's going on with their kids. They just give their kids access to everything.
Right.
I mean, and then with the advent of social media and everything else, man, we are so connected to everybody. And we have all these influences that are operating in our home that we have no idea that's going on. And the culture is so invasive with pornography. Yeah, the average, I think it was something like 92% of sixth graders have seen pornography already. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I mean, when I was a little kid, the only way you saw that is somebody had a magazine underneath something, and that was it, right?
Right.
But now they, like you said, a push of a button, they have access to everything, and young minds do not have the capacity to look at that and it stimulates something in you and say, "Oh, I shouldn't do that."
That's it.
And once they've opened Pandora's box, well, it just grows in them. And their young minds are being rewired. I mean, they say that viewing pornography is more addictive than heroin.
Yes.
It's like, holy smokes, if that is the new drug, if you will, for young men, they're seeing that and they're being encouraged by everybody else. Oh, everybody's doing this. Well, that's not framing how they view people. I mean, it's like, it's super scary. It's scary for my daughters. It's scary for my boys. It's like, who are they going to marry? That's gonna value them, that's gonna protect them, that's gonna cherish them, that's gonna do the things that we would think that, well, most people in society would do that. No. We've been assaulted on so many levels in our society, in our homes, in the media, in social media, online, in our schools. I mean, I had this conversation. This was, probably about 4 years ago. We were going in. Part of the dynamic here in North Carolina is on the sex education for high school students. There was a requirement, because we had State Bill 199 that requires anybody who's over the age of 18, if you're aware of a trafficking situation and you don't report it, you could be charged with a misdemeanor.
Makes sense.
Okay, so it's kind of and then also State Bill 199 also removed the consent needed from an adult to report it. So say I knew you were being trafficked, I didn't have to get your consent to report it. I could just simply report it. So it did two things. It removed like the HIPAA violations that healthcare people were worried about. So anybody over 18. So we were having to go and educate, because guess what? There's a bunch of 18-year-olds in the schools. All your seniors, some juniors are 18 years old. And so it was required for us to go in and talk about human trafficking and explain to them State Bill 199. So we would come and tag at the end of it. So one of the teachers had their curriculum. So I was like, can I borrow this? I wanted to read through it and check out this curriculum. And so I get this curriculum, take it home to see what they're teaching before we get there, after the 6 weeks of teaching. And I open up this book, and I'm reading through this book, and I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. And there was this one section, the whole section was, they had this game in there called red light, green light. What was green light and what was red light and what was yellow light. And the stuff that they had was green light was like having anal sex with a condom was a green light. Like they just would, that was just one, right? And they had all this stuff that was there, and I'm thinking, you're giving to a kid, green light means go ahead and do it. So this game was like telling them all the things they could go ahead and do. And it was all just crazy stuff. But that wasn't even the thing that set me off. I mean, this is crazy. Whoever thought this didn't really think this through. What kind of idiot came up with this thing? But when I read the next section, it was a dialogue, like a role-playing game of how the guy is to convince the girl to have sex with him.
What?
And what the conversation should look like. And I went to the school board. They had this meeting, and so the school board people there, and they had an open mic, right? So I go up, I'm like, hey, I'm part of this human trafficking thing. I want to read something to you. And so I read this passage. Didn't tell him where it came from.
Yeah.
I just read it. And I said, that is what I teach in Human Trafficking 101. This is the language the trafficker will use to try to get those that are vulnerable to come in and do commercial sex acts, to coerce them and to deceive them into coming in. This is the language. I mean, it was verbatim language that I would use when I was explaining how a trafficker talks to somebody, or how they court them online, or how they do these things. And then I closed the book and I said, and that right there was not from a trafficker. It's from the school board, your curriculum that you are teaching our children to do. And dude, you could have dropped a pin in the place. And I mean, I was so physically broken about this. I mean, tears were coming out of my eyes as I'm explaining this, because I'm like, I'm fighting every day to stop traffickers, and y'all are promoting, you're grooming our young men to become traffickers,
right,
with this language. And I actually had a school board member come up and threaten me. And I'm like, bro, I'm like, listen, he's a little bit shorter than me. I'm a big man. I'm 6'3", 230. I'm like, we could go right now. Right. Like, I don't even care. Like, you can threaten me.
I already know people in the jail.
Yeah, so it's like, no problem, right? All I got to do is make a call, right? And I'm thinking, like, this is go time. Like, I don't care. I don't got nothing to lose. I'm going to pay my fine in jail, and we'll come back and do it again. Like, but I was sitting there, and this guy is threatening me because I just took a picture of it. He said, well, that's copyright infringement. And I put it on Facebook. And it already had like 250 shares in like an hour. And so people were like going crazy, and it was stirring all this stuff up in the community. But it's true.
Yeah.
And nobody could see it. I read it in a public forum, and then everybody flips out about it. But nobody was willing to do anything. And that curriculum had been in there for 3 or 4 years.
That's crazy.
And it's like we've been so lulled to sleep in our society that we don't realize the impact that our society is having on us, our children, our family, our legacy.
Yeah.
Like, what are we going to leave behind for future generations?
That's it.
It's going to be horrible if we're not willing to suffer, to take a stand and say, no, this is enough.
Right. And the one thing I think about too, ever since that dinner, is just driving past all these hotels. You're right. When I drive past them before, I didn't even see them.
Yeah.
I would see the car dealership after it, and I would see the other stuff, the restaurants we might go to. But these hotels, you just drive past them, and they're so invisible. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying the ones I'm driving past I know for sure, but actually, as a matter of fact, I know there was one for sure. A Memorial Drive across from that Fresh Market. There was a girl who was murdered there about a year ago, I think, sexually trafficked. Mm-hmm. And so I've always thought about that hotel. And these girls, so you don't see the hotels and you don't see the girls. And it's like you pull up information on the girls and you don't find, oh, she was a beloved mother of 3 and she went to her kids' soccer games. It's like they slip through the cracks, and it's like you don't even know the victims. And you're right. She's probably from New Jersey or Florida, maybe somewhere in between. It's just like, and it's just the one that I see. Mm-hmm. And just the prevalence of it, like you said, the U.S. being the most sexually trafficked country, I hear that, but then I think in my mind, I have to actually apply that to what that actually means. I feel like that means if you set up a computer right here and you posted that you were trying to have sex with a minor, 15 miles around here, you'd have a couple hundred bytes. Yeah. And people would walk in this door. Mm-hmm. That would actually you need that actually would happen. Yeah. And I need to train my brain to feel like that actually would happen.
Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest eye opener for me. I mean, the first year that we started, before we even did the stings, we did 28 rescues in just that county that we started in, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is where I grew up at. I went to high school here. I graduated from here. My family lives here, and 28 people, and we had not even scratched the surface. Right. And it was like, oh my God, this is something that's bigger than any of us can fix. And so how do we at least take steps towards redemption? How do we take steps to seeing people rescued? How do we take steps to seeing those that are rescued restored? How do we do that?
And I think the one thing too that for me I think makes it a little bit more real is I have a 12-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, but I remember you had that one girl on there and I can picture her face and everything, but then her dad came up. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. That was a moment. And just when he said he had no idea, when she gave her testimony, then he said he had just no idea where she was and he had no idea that this was going on. Yeah. it's like that dad would have broke down. It seemed to me would have broke down any
Yeah,
single
for
door
sure.
to get there, but he just had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, well, and they were a great family.
Yeah.
You know, she went off to college. She got connected to this guy. You know, he slipped her a pill to help her stay up at night, and it was meth. She didn't know it. She got highly addicted, and then that guy trafficked her out, and she thought he loved her.
Yeah.
You know, it was like, and then it led to not just him, but then other people trafficking her out, and it just escalated down the road, and it was just, you know, wow. You don't realize it, but man, we could be all of us are just like one choice away, one bad choice away from just complete destruction. And that's, again, why we have such a great need for people with a moral compass
Yeah.
that can say, oh, no, that's not good.
Right.
And not be afraid of the backlash that would come because, oh, well, you're restricting people, or you're trying to put this up, or you're trying to do this, or you're saying I'm not good enough, or whatever the reasons are. But we're so afraid now to call evil evil,
Mm-hmm.
because as soon as you do it, you're going to be labeled, and the very thing that you're calling out, they're going to flip the script on you and try to get you. And so I think that's where, for me, it's a matter of, you know, you mentioned the word legacy, but is my reputation, to me, is it more important than my legacy? Is it, you know, because what people think about me out there, it can vary based on their opinions, based on false information,
And who they are.
And their perspective, right? But legacy is really who you are and what you really leave behind. And you know, it's just at this point in my life, I don't really care what you think about me anymore. I know what's right. I know what's wrong. I know what I've seen. You can't change the facts of what I've seen. But I also know that the only thing that I've seen that's transformed people, that's changed people, is when they come into an environment where they're loved and they're valued, and an environment where people can begin to walk through brokenness and suffering together, not remove it, right? Our job in the Safe House is not to remove everything that's hard. Our job is to get you a safe place so you can work through the hard stuff. And when you're doing that, that's when you realize, oh, I need God. I need something bigger than me.
Mm-hmm.
I need help. And it's in those moments of brokenness that real transformation take place. I'm convinced that nothing in life, that where we really change, there has to be some place of brokenness and humility, of where you realize this is bigger than me. For anybody that's had any real transformation in their life and made huge adjustments or changes in their lives,
Right.
there's been that pivotal moment. And that didn't come because everything was easy. It came because, oh man, this is bigger than me. This is too hard.
Yeah.
And so again, and that's a big thing that I was meeting with our staff with just the other day, of how do we create a safe environment so they can work through hard stuff? Because we'll take them to the psychologist and they want to just numb them out with medicine.
Right.
And then they never feel nothing. They walk around
Yeah.
like zombies.
Yeah.
Like,
It
well,
breaks my heart.
that's not working.
Right.
So we can't do that. And even my counselor, my trauma counselor is meeting with us and is like, hey, you know, they're on this, and this. And that may be okay for the initial, just to get you,
Right.
get some kind of baseline activity. But then you got to kind of pull that away and then start working through stuff, because I can't just release them out into the world to fight for themselves. They've already been out there and been brutalized. How do I equip them and give them the resources and the skills and the capacity to walk through hard stuff if I just simply remove it all? Now,
Right.
I mean, in this environment, they don't have to worry about food.
Yeah.
They don't have
Yeah.
to worry about
The
shelter.
basic stuff. Yeah.
I mean, but they're having to work through stuff that me and you probably never will ever have to work through.
Right.
I mean, they're having to work violations from their family. They're having to walk through just deep bitterness and unforgiveness, where these individuals have just done horrible things to them. I mean, they say that the post-traumatic stress of an individual who's been trafficked for 2 years is the equivalent of a man who's been in war for 40 straight years.
What? Say that again?
So a woman who's been in trafficking for 2 years, her post-traumatic stress level is the equivalent of a gentleman if he was in war for 40 straight years. Now, I grew up in a military family. My dad was in the Air Force. My grandfather was in the Air Force. I knew people that were in Vietnam. I mean, we were surrounded by people like that because in a military community, you see that. And man, I can tell you, I know a guy. He only served 2 tours, so 18 months in
year and a half.
And he literally his family couldn't find him for 2 days. And you know where they found him at? They found him in the bushes behind their house. A helicopter was flying over to ECU, one of those medical helicopters.
Right.
And he all of a sudden flashed back to Nam and was literally laying in the bushes hiding so they wouldn't kill him.
And that's a year and a half of that.
Yeah. And that was 30, 40 years, before. And that flashback still hit him. And so imagine if he was there for 40 straight years, bullets flying, that type of adrenaline releasing, fight or flight, all those chemicals going on in your head and your body being released constantly. That's what they're experiencing in a 2-year period equivalent of 40 years in constant war.
Direct.
Yeah. And that's why when I went to D.C., we were talking with, I shared with you before the podcast about that incident where I met with a national known leader in human trafficking, and they were like, hey, it's impossible to deal with survivors. You might as well just try to create awareness and let young people know about it, because once they've been in that world, it's just impossible to see them restored.
With that attitude, it is.
Well, for sure, yeah. But I think that's the most amazing thing is we are not only seeing them restored, but we're seeing them help other people.
That was what I was going to say.
Yeah.
What you're doing is phenomenal work, but how powerful is it when a girl who you guys have saved, I shouldn't say you guys have saved, who is found Christ and she's been healed, then she goes to the jails.
Yeah.
It's got to be exponential.
It's incredible because, it's one thing for me to say it and they go, oh, yeah, that's cool.
Right.
But you lived where I lived. It's kind of like, it's kind of like the guy in the projects. He gets out and he goes plays in the NBA. Like everybody in that community all of a sudden believes they could be in the NBA.
Right.
Even though they don't have the skills or anything, right? The hope comes alive, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh my God, that's the thing. Like you could do that. And so she walks in the jails or in the hotel reach, and all of a sudden everybody knows her story, knows her past. They'd seen her in the trap house. They'd seen her, being trafficked. They knew the things that happened to her, and she's doing good. She's got her own house, her own car, her own family. She's healthy.
Right.
What did you find? I want to know.
That's
hope comes alive in those moments because she becomes literally the example of hope.
Right.
And that's what the Bible actually says, that the hope of glory resides in us. It's through our testimony.
Yep.
It's through our sharing of what he's done in us that produces hope in other people because they see the reality of what God can do. And I think that's probably the most rewarding thing, because I'm telling you, there are huge disappointments and there are huge difficulties.
I can imagine.
Because we get calls where this one that we've been trying to help, she OD'd and died. I mean, I'll never forget, we got this call, this one girl, to identify the body, and they couldn't identify her. They had chopped her head off, her legs off, her hands off. They lit her body on fire. And what was so sad about that situation, it was 2 weeks prior. I had one more conversation with her. Hey, let's get you in the safe house. Okay, I'll do that. I'm gonna get out, but I got to get some things set first. And that had been going on for 2 years.
That back and forth dialogue.
Yeah. She'd been in and out of the jail, and I knew she'd been part of all that stuff, but she just, I can't do it right now. She just, for whatever reason, I don't know, but it was just like she still was. There's something that they had over her that still kept bringing her back, and that was a tough one. The toughest one though probably was the young lady who had been sober for 2 years, done great. She went out for one drink with a guy. They found her body 2 days later in a hotel, beaten up. We still don't understand what all happened there. But she just went for just a drink with a guy, and then gone. I heard a statistic the other day. I don't know the validity of it, but you know how you can see memes, so anybody can say anything on the internet, right?
And truth is relative anyway, so
yeah,
let's hear
right.
it.
So it doesn't matter. So, but I heard that around half of the murders in the United States were taking place by somebody who's drunk. And when that was said, I was like, no, that can't. Is that real? I don't know if it is. Let's on the
Right.
premise that it is. Well, that's something legal.
Mm-hmm.
That's something no big deal. You can just drink, no big deal. I mean, everybody does it. It's no big deal. But if you knew that half the murders in the United States was by somebody that was drunk, then that give you some statistical information that says drinking probably is not so good, especially to the point of being drunk. Like that can cause somebody to get killed.
Right.
And then the other statistics that they gave was that half the people that were murdered were drunk.
Yeah, I believe both those,
Yeah, so it was like,
if not more.
So that brings me to drugs. Well, no wonder why. No wonder why that when someone enters into any type of recreational drug, the opportunity for them to be sexually exploited and to be trafficked grows exponentially. Exponentially. I mean, the statistics are overwhelming that if you've been in active addiction for 2 years, as a female, you have been sexually exploited, like almost 100%.
Well, and all addiction is rooted in trauma.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
So it's like you said earlier, I think it was before we were recording, it's like the chicken and the egg. they probably were sexually exploited initially off drug use, but then the drug use of the alcohol is the only thing that's quote unquote healing them of their pain because it's rooted in that trauma.
Self-medication, yeah.
Yeah. And I just think it's so funny because I look at I don't want to be like the old curmudgeon who's complaining, but I'm almost 4 years sober. And always you hear, well, drink responsibly, which is totally an oxymoron.
Sure.
And then I read something, I can't remember what book it was, but it was talking about, is alcohol safe because it's legal, or is it legal because it's safe? And we perceive alcohol to be safe because it's legal, but it's not legal because it's safe. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
it's just like, and they say, what is it? Like you said, pornography, and I do think, is it smoking is harder to quit than heroin because of in alcohol because of the availability and the legality of it.
That's right.
And so, again, it's so fascinating. But yeah, I think the addiction is rooted in trauma. And how do you? I just think when they're walking in here, it's not just that they were trafficked. I'm guessing most times you got a big time drug addiction you got to handle.
Oh, absolutely. And that's usually before they even come in the emergency shelter. We're going to a detox first.
Right.
I mean, they're in the detox sometimes up to 10 days, but usually it's between 2 to 7. But almost every single girl that comes in that we get off the streets, they are addicted to some kind of drug, and it's so you have on top of the trauma these other layers of addiction. You have all this other stuff that you're dealing with. So our program is not just dealing with the sexual healing and the abuse that they've encountered. It's walking out coping skills. It's walking out recognizing where I've been an enabler or been enabled to do things. It's recognizing triggers. It's going so much deeper than just what you would think about, well, they've got this issue. No. It's compounded. And then you add the dynamics of things that's happened because the average age of sexual exploitation for a trafficking victim between the ages of 11 and 14. So you're dealing with childhood trauma.
Right.
Then the compounded adult trauma, then the addiction. I mean, no wonder why, if you're looking at it from just a secular mindset with no hope, it's impossible.
Right.
They're always going to be like this. They're always going to struggle. There's really no hope for them. I get it. I get why they say that. But absolutely there is hope because I've already seen it.
Right.
You can't convince me otherwise. I've seen how the Lord can come in and change somebody. And is that change hard? Yes. Is there difficulty along the way? Absolutely. Is there times of relapse? Absolutely. Are they still places where they struggle even years afterwards? Yes. But again, my purpose is now rooted in, I'm called to be whole. And so even though that purpose may look way down the road and I may go all over the place like I talked about earlier, I can be made whole. And the Lord can continue to transform me. He continue to work on me. He continue to set me free. And there are going to be moments of brokenness, and then moments of humility, and then moments of transformation out of that.
Right.
And I just keep getting up, and I keep pressing and pressing towards that goal, that I can be whole, that I can do what's right. I can have a healthy family. I can have a healthy life. I just keep pressing and pressing and pressing. And it's something about that every time I endure it and overcome that, I'm strengthened inside to overcome something I didn't think I was possible to overcome before. And every time it's like, oh, I'm getting there. I remember, I hardly lifted weights in high school, and went to college, and they were like, and at that time I was like 190 pounds, 6'3", playing basketball in college, and they were like, hey, we want you to gain at least 20 pounds of muscle. And I'm like, 20 pounds of muscle? And I started lifting, and my trainer there, he was assistant coach as well, big old man. He played for Rutgers, and he was, I think at the time, he was the all-time high school. He had the most running yards in New York for a running back in high school. And he played point guard and running back at Rutgers. Dang. And big man, he had tree trunks for legs. And I remember we got in there and lifted weights, and he put like every plate in the gym in there, and the bar was bent over him like this, and he never touched the bar. He just stuck it on these huge traps he had, went down like 3 or 4 times, and I'm just looking at him like, he said, when you could do that, you talk to me. And I'm like, I don't want to talk to you at all. Like, that dude could crush me, I was like, and he was always the one with the bag when we did individual drills, and we were driving into the basket.
He'd just trucking you.
He'd put you out of bounds, And so I remember getting in there and working out, and I was like, man, I'm gonna try to get to 500 pounds to squat. That was my goal, And I got in there, and it was like incrementally, I just kept pressing and pressing and pressing. I remember you hit the 300, 350, and then 400, and you got 405, and then you kept. And I remember it was like it only took 2 years to get there,
right?
Because we were doing so much other work. But you know what I had to do to get there?
Suffer.
Oh my God! Like I can remember like getting out of my bed at my apartment and go to take a step to walk to the bathroom and literally fall to the ground.
Oh, didn't you talk about sitting on a toilet?
Yeah, couldn't do it. Couldn't get up. Like crawling out of there. And I remember when the trainer came in there and he was like, man, you need to have over 10,000 calories a day because of the type of my metabolism was and how much energy I was burning. And that dude would show up there at the apartment with a thing of peanut butter and a loaf of bread at the end of the day. I mean, it's 10 o'clock at night. And he would show up with that and be like, man, I was looking at your thing. You haven't ate enough calories today. I'm like, what? It's like, I can't eat no more. In the morning, I would take 6 eggs with a scoop of ice cream, 2 scoops of weight gainer, 2 scoops of protein, a banana, and some strawberries.
Ballooned out.
And grind that up and would drink it before practice. And then I would have breakfast afterwards. It's like, I'm tired of eating. I can't eat no more. But it was brutal. But before, that changed. And now, like certain stuff, I don't even think about. Like I'm out there with my kid doing drills with him, and I'm thinking, man, you're a weakling. Mm-hmm. But I've already endured stuff that he's never endured, and I have to remind myself, incremental.
Yep.
I didn't get here overnight. What was the steps that I wasn't even taking the steps that he's taking right now at 12. I wasn't doing these things, but I was, and that's oftentimes the way we judge people too, right? We look at, it's so easy to look at that survivor and say, oh, well, I understand where you came from, but, and we make excuses or stuff, but then we realize, but there's some steps that you need to take here, but they're not going to get there overnight, and you can't get frustrated in the process either. Right. And it's so easy to get frustrated, especially when you're here looking back at this way. Oh, it's not that hard, but it's so easy to forget all the hills and mountains and struggles that you've been through. Now, if it's fresh in your mind, if it's something that you're continuing to work on, there's a place of compassion. But if you've gotten there over a long period of time and it's been slow, incremental steps, it's real easy just to think, oh, they could make better choices. Oh, they could do this. I hear people say that all the time. But they never actually sat down with what I would call the crack whore and hear her story that, man, her dad was in jail. Her mom was on drugs. She lived with her grandparents. Her grandparents let her do whatever she wanted to do because they didn't want to deal with it. Mm-hmm. Her uncle raped her at 11. At 13, the guy that she thought was her boyfriend, gang raped her with 5 other dudes. Mm-hmm. And here she is at 25, and all she's been doing is selling herself just to numb the pain, to get enough money for drugs. And did she really make that choice? There were some choices made for her that led her to this place. And here I was judging her like, oh man, she's choosing to be out on the street. She's choosing this, and I don't know the full story. I don't know the struggles that's taking place. And she never had one place that she overcame. because she got hit with another one, and she never got up. And so she has no belief that she can change anything. There's no hope.
Right.
There's no life could be different. Life beat me down and beat me down. And it was amazing. You know, that lady that I was sitting there talking to that first time that I really had this revelation. Oh my God. Nobody saw her. Nobody's heard her story. Nobody's ever said, we believe in you. She's just been beat down the whole time.
Right.
Well, no wonder why she's actively looking for anything to just numb the pain. No wonder why she's suicidal. No wonder why, you know, she's stealing everything she can find, because she's just in survival mode trying to figure it out.
Right.
And there's so many people across the planet that are living that way, because the statistics show us, you know, 86% of individuals that have an abuse or neglect case in DSS, they're being sexually exploited. 86%. That means they've entered into the foster care system or they've got a DSS case. Why is that? Oh, well, it's easy. A mother and a father are not present to nurture and protect. You remove that element, and a kid is extremely vulnerable. 86%. Now,
that's crazy.
3 of my children are adopted out of the foster care system. I adopted my children when they were very young. But the reality, 86%, well, that's probably almost 100% reality that all 3 of them could have been exploited if they had not come into our home at a very, very young age. I'm talking about like 10 months, 2 months, and 2 years. And it's like, you know, and then you begin to realize, man, you just go to the school. Go to the school and just go in there and ask them, who in here lives with your mom and your dad, and they're both married and they've been together the whole time? And like less than 15% of the kids will raise their hand and say, that's me. I mean, and you just remove the father figure. No, don't even talk about the mother, just the father figure, and that's the ones that are usually absentee.
Right.
The vulnerability of that child being sexually exploited, if it's a female, astronomical, the results. Because the protector's not there. The person's not there that says, that's not going to happen in my house. Dude, I don't care who you are. You're not coming over here and doing this to my daughter.
Right.
Like there's
Right.
none of that. And it's like, and there's psychologically something attached to when dad's not there as a protector to love and to mentor and to help and to encourage. Well, I've got to find that in somebody.
Yeah. A male figure.
Mm-hmm. And it's going to be a male figure that seems powerful.
Yep.
That seems strong. Somebody that seems confident.
They'll affirm you.
Mm-hmm. Affirm you. Well, that's the trafficker.
Yep.
He's very confident. And so these are your vulnerable people in our society. People on drugs. People who have broken homes. Young kids that are longing for affirmation because they're not getting it. And that's why we have this epidemic. There's so many vulnerable people. And people say, well, aren't you afraid of this? Because this is a huge criminal activity. I mean,
Right.
it's
I've thought about that.
$150 billion industry or more. I mean, that's just a lowball estimate, but it's
Right.
way more. And
Money you don't see.
It's far surpassed drugs. I'm here to tell you. They said it 10 years ago that it was close to equaling amount. It's far surpassed drugs because there's no reporting mechanism. You know, the IRS doesn't have a schedule for that.
Right.
You know, so it's like
Right.
they know exactly that this is what it is. And the reality that this many people are being trafficked here in the United States, there's this unbelievable amount of people that just have no idea that it's going on, for one, right? But this stuff is happening on a criminal level. I'm trying to be careful with my words because I got open investigations right now. So I'm trying to think of how to say this without implicating anything that I know.
Right.
Okay, so it reaches all levels of society. Like, there are people involved in many different levels. I'm not trying to be conspiracy theory. I'm just basing it on information that I know, okay? There are people involved in every level of government. Like my SBI agent tells me who to go talk to in different areas. These are the people you can trust, or don't go to talk to them. Why would he say that to me? Unless he knows something else, right?
Right.
It's like, oh my God, this is impacting. I mean, you got the cartel that's doing certain things.
Right.
You've got homegrown stuff that's taking place. You've got other type of criminal organizations doing it. I mean, just look at for example, here's one that's been out, so we can talk about this one. The one in Jackson or Wilmington.
You guys mentioned that one.
Yeah, so 155 victims. One of them is a lawyer that was trafficking. Can I tell you that's not uncommon? DAs, judges, police officers.
It feels like a movie.
It absolutely
Taken.
It absolutely feels like that can't be real.
Yeah.
But it absolutely is. And that's what I think that's the craziest part to me, is it's happening in arenas and areas that we just don't see it.
Right. We
have no
assume it's
idea.
the drug dealer down the road every single time.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's or in the projects or in the low income housing or with this group of people, but it's across the board and it's happening. And I'm telling you, it the more I'm in it, the more I'm scared for my children. Because it's like, my kids don't do anything. Like, I know
Right.
everybody that comes in the house. I know your mama. I know your daddy, your grandma, and I'm gonna be
Even
able
then,
to.
still
and
scared.
I'm gonna be able to go to their house too if I need to.
Right.
Right. I know where they live. Like there's some. No, my kids don't spend the night with nobody. You know, it's like even family. Like you're still. You know, you're very conditional on how you do that. You know, what good goes on after 9 o'clock at night anyway. You know,
Right.
so it's like, I don't know. There's just so much happening in our world today that if you're as a man, if you have not committed to trust the Lord to help you, I don't know how you deal with it. I mean, I don't.
Right.
I mean, there's so many things out there that would scare the daylights out of us as men. Like there's no way we could do our job if we don't have wisdom from God, if we
Right.
don't have endurance to overcome things, if we're not willing to
Call out evil.
yeah, if we're not willing to do that, then man, we're just going to get sucked into the tidal wave of depravity that's out there, and it's going to drag our family down with it.
That's when you reminded me as I close up too. But you remind me of it. It almost reminds me of the Ku Klux Klan, because there was what the Klan was. It was so interesting because you didn't much. I think there's a parallel to sex trafficking, because much like the Klan, during the day you didn't know who was in the Klan.
Yeah.
But a lot of times it was your judges, your lawyer. And again, I'm not saying don't trust any judges.
Sure,
Don't.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the Klan was, it was police officers, it was judges, it was lawyers, it was the farmers, it was everybody, and you couldn't really trust anybody because you didn't know who was in the Klan.
Yeah.
Obviously, they would have the robes, so there was this mystery to it. And I think sex trafficking is the same way.
Yeah.
It's so, if we really knew, I think if every house had like a green light on it that you knew it was sex trafficking, I think it would just blow our minds.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, the Klan was so dangerous because you didn't know who to shoot. You didn't know who to go after because it was so deeply embedded across the board.
Yeah.
You couldn't just say, let's just go after drug dealers because that's where it's at. And that's one thing but that's where I love what you guys are doing, right? It's like average age 11 or 12. 86% of DSS kids are sexually exploited. Average woman is raped 6,000 times that's sexually trafficked. All these things are just so discouraging, but what you guys are doing is like, well, let's do it then.
Yeah.
Like, let's go after it. Versus, like, for me, I'm just like, yeah, I could see why someone would be like, let's just try to give out information, get out and be proactive, which we need to do. But you guys are like, hell yeah, let's go after it. Let's
Yeah.
fight it. And
Yeah.
I just think, man, so share information on Cry Freedom, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Like
so Cry Freedom at cryfreedommissions.com is our website. You can go there. So we've got a couple things that are really, really cool that we've done. So one of the things, obviously, is we have the Safe House. We're here right now at the Safe House in the main house. So we have an emergency shelter. We've got the long-term care side and then transitional. But we also have a social enterprise. So we created a shop. Originally, it was downtown Goldsboro. We've got 2 shops there now. It's got a cafe in it, coffee. And then we sell survivor-made jewelry, survivor-made products. And then we have all kinds of other wholesale products that we sell. And the income from those goes to help us fund our Safe House. Obviously, we're reaching out for grants. We're
Right.
reaching out to donors. But do you know that only 10% of our total budget is ran by grants? Everything else is donations or stuff that we sell through
Wow.
the social enterprise. And so we are always in need of businesses, individuals, churches to come alongside of us to give. I mean, a lot of churches do set us up on their missions board to be a monthly giver to us. Those are invaluable resources because, again, this work is something that requires a tremendous amount of staff
Yeah.
for the services that we provide, because we are a total holistic wraparound services approach to human trafficking. It's not just we're going out to identify people, we're actually helping to get them
Right,
rescued.
not just sheltering them.
But then we're sheltering them, then we're having a program to help rehab and restore their lives, and then we're giving them life skills, job skills, we're trying to get them employment. So we hire a lot of our survivors to give them, because a lot of them have never had any jobs. So how do you go out and get a job?
Yeah.
You know, we're getting them education, we're getting their GED. If they've already gone through that, then we help work with colleges and so forth to get them scholarships and get them into other programs. So we're working constantly to do that. You know, I'm thinking about one of our young girls right now. You know, how do I get her to a place to be able to have a car, to be able to have this, you know? So we're working with donors that do that kind of stuff, that give cars and give other things. But this is I mean, you could set the budget for anything, but I think the remarkable thing that we are seeing take place, and this is something that has really made me proud of this organization that I've been a part of, is for every dollar that is given, we're able to take and multiply it by 4 of services. So, you know, we may have $1 million of services, $1 million allocated in the budget towards specific services, but we were able to accomplish almost $3.5 million worth of services. So there's this, if you give the government, you know, $1, you're going to see negative $20 of services.
It'll last for 2 more.
and so I think that's one of the remarkable things that takes place is seeing not just what's been given, but how God takes and multiplies it. I mean, it just exponentially grows. I mean, we started just 6 years ago, and we have an office in Sanford. We have an office in Roxborough. We have an office here in Ayden. We just came back yesterday from Elizabeth City to talk to an organization that's going to partner with us to have an office there.
Wow.
We've got people from all over the United States. We had people fly in the last month from Idaho for us to train them of what we're doing, and they're talking about having a satellite office there in their region because they have nobody in the whole state. You know, so it's like this is growing exponentially, and we're seeing it as we believe God's called us to impact the nation, because I mean the traffickers aren't stopping in North Carolina.
Right.
I mean, they're coming through and going other places. I mean, just the last 3 trafficking rings that we helped uncover, one of them was between New York and Pennsylvania and us, right here in eastern North Carolina. Another one was coming up and down from Georgia, Miami, and then we had another one that was it was weird. They had places in Texas and Colorado and here. They were moving people around and stuff. And of course, you got the cartel that are moving people all over the place. Yeah, we got a big case right now that we're dealing with that's got all kinds of unbelievable things happening. I mean, the technology that they're using to track people, GPS chips and stuff. It's crazy.
You mean the cartel's tracking people with?
Oh, yeah. They stick stuff in people, and then they pay on a cash app, and then you get a GPS on your thing after you pay for them, and you go to that coordinates and pick up the girl, bring her to your house, and then someone else comes and picks them up at your house. Trafficker's never there.
Because they have something on them? Oh, my gosh.
Crazy stuff.
And that's just going to get even more.
Oh, yeah, with the advance of technology and everything. I'm telling you, there's no end to what people will do when they're gripped by evil.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no end to what they'll do.
And how many people will take down with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate it. I could sit here and just ask you question after question, because you really just started to open things up to my mind that I've seen in movies, and you just assume like, oh, that was a great movie. Yeah. Well, like, how real is that? Like, I think in the movie Taken. Yeah. Which again, I don't think Liam Neeson's probably that good of a fighter, but it's like just the ring and the involvement of everybody. And it's like, that's actually happening.
Oh, and we actually did a promo with Liam Neeson.
Oh, really? Yeah, I'm sure he could fight all those people then. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, but I didn't get to physically see him, but it was us and about 5 other organizations. We piled together and produced some funds. He actually came and did a promo for all the American Airlines and all the Hilton hotels. And it's like an information. It's like I've got it. I think it's on our website.
I'll put it up there.
But he goes on there and he goes, you may have heard, in that voice that he has. And he just goes through the myths of what human trafficking is. And it's a great, 45 second to a minute and 25 seconds. There's 2 different clips that he does. But
that's hilarious.
Because we were always, it was one of those opportunities, like this other organization called us and said, hey, we're trying to get this together. And we're like, yes, we're in.
We're in, yeah.
We want to be a part of that, because, we always are telling people what you see in Taken is like 10%. 10% of all trafficking cases where people actually are kidnapped.
Right.
90% are being trafficked by people they know.
Yeah.
Right? It's the family member, it's the boyfriend, it's the employer, it's the friend down the road. And so, like, all we've taught our kids is, like, stranger danger. But 90% of all the trafficking cases are being trafficked by people somebody they know.
Right.
And then it's like, oh,
then it just totally,
God, you know,
right.
we've been focusing. I mean, for sure there needs to be that
right.
realization there are people out there, but there's things happening in our community that have been swept under the rugs for generations.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's talked about, that nobody's aware of. I mean, you see that happen all the time. Like a school teacher gets,
right.
and then all of a sudden you
that.
see like 20 people come out over the last 20 years that have been assaulted by this person. You know, it's like, oh,
yeah.
You saw that with the Catholic Church with all these priests.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it just stays. How does this stuff stay? How does it stay silent for so long? And that's part of the dynamic that makes sex trafficking so unusual, because the shame that's involved. I don't want to share what's happened to me because it brings the stigma and shame of what's happened on me.
Yep.
And so it's better to just stay silent. And that's why 95% of trafficking victims don't identify as trafficking victims. They've been conditioned not to believe, but also there's that shame that's associated with sexual abuse, and where you've been traumatized and been brutalized through this type of activity, that it affects you so deeply that you don't want nobody to know this has happened to you.
Yeah, so then if the robber is quiet and the robbed are quiet,
nobody knows what's going on.
But again, just you guys, again, I can't thank you enough, because it's just like it seems like the largest organization in North Carolina that sees all those facts, sees all those trends, sees all that momentum going against it, and just puts a foot in the ground. And so I'm just so excited. I'm just so thankful for you taking the time and just continue to bring light to it. And I'll put a bunch on here. And so I just appreciate your time, man.
Man, it's been awesome.
It's been awesome. And
it's always good when you talk about this type of stuff too. You're refreshing. You're seeing it again. You're hearing it again. It just renews your purpose.
That's it.
And that's so important. Like, you know, even the Bible says, you know, write the vision out and make it plain so other people can run with it. And so many times we know what we're doing, but sometimes it's so important to sit down and talk about it again, because it just helps you.
Takes you back.
Yeah. This is where we're at. This is how I got here. We got to keep going. We're going to be passionate to fight. We're going to not give up. We don't care what it takes. We're going to see people set free and redeemed and restored, and it's worth it. It's worth it.
And it's the stories. It's the stories that always get me too, because it's like in your testimony. It's like when I hear these girls' stories, especially from them that feel comfortable enough to come out and share stories. Nothing's more powerful to me than stories. Yeah,
and those are like rated G stories. Like
I
they
can imagine.
hold back so much, you know.
Right.
It's like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's incredible to see how somebody so broken could be so transformed. It gives hope to everybody.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate it. Hopefully, I'd love to have you back on, maybe in like your next Florida office or something like that. We'll do it again.
Yeah,
but, man,
that sounds good.
I appreciate it, man.
All right, thank you, buddy.
Thanks.